Hello, it's been a while. I'm running Microsoft Flight Simulator. I've got World Update 6 installed, and we've got the Airbus, the fly-by-wire Airbus, sitting on the ground at Frankfurt Airport, and I thought it might be fun to just go and fly a circuit of Frankfurt, have a look at the city, and then come back into Frankfurt Airport and land again. Okay, so we're in the Airbus. First things first, in the Airbus, we have to go and turn on the batteries, which will give us some power. Turn on the external power, which gives us more power. Overhead, we immediately go and turn on the inertial navigation system. That'll take a few minutes to power up, but we've got a few minutes because we're going to be starting the engines and all those other nice things. Turn on the crew the crew air supply. We can turn on the fuel pumps while we're up here. I'm kind of doing a lot of this out of order just to do it quickly, but it's not a major problem. We can go while we're here and turn on the no smoking signs, turn on the seatbelt sign. Okay, so the first thing we need to think about is turning on the APU. So in order to start the engines, we need to have compressed air. So we switch on the master switch for the APU and then start the APU. The auxiliary power unit, if you're not aware of this, if you look in the back of a plane, there's an exhaust. So in the tail, there's a small jet engine, and the primary reason for that jet engine is to provide compressed air that can then spin the gas turbine engines up. So to do that, once we have the APU providing power, it can also generate the air, which we can switch on APU bleed, and what that means is bleed the air away from it into the engines. So if we look down here, this is showing the APU display at the moment. We can brighten this up with this knob right here, so you can see it coming up to speed, and it will start generating. There it goes. So the APU is now generating power. That means at this point we can disconnect the ground power as well, so we can turn the external power off. Yeah, because we're generating electric from the APU now, but it also means we can turn on the APU bleed, which means the air from the jet engine is siphoned through to the jet engines to spin them up. So if we turn the engines onto starter mode and switch on engine number 2, we can actually see it happening here. So N2, which is the gas turbine percentage of nominal, is coming up for engine number 2. When it gets to just over 20%, it will start to feed fuel in, so you'll see the exhaust gas temperature raise and the fuel flow raise, and then you'll see the N1 percentage is already happening. Look, the N1 percentage will spin up. So this is the gas turbine and this is the turbofan. If we go and have a look outside, so this part of the engine is the gas turbine down the middle, and if we look around from behind, there's the fan. So they're two independent things, and there's a gearbox between them. But most of the thrust actually comes from the fan, not from the gas turbine. That's how these engines get to be so efficient over just a pure gas turbine, or turbojet as they used to be called. Okay, so let's go and look back inside. Engine number 2 is coming up. So we can now turn on engine number 1. Same deal again, you can see the N2 percentage, the gas turbine percentage coming up. When it gets to about 20%, the fuel flow will kick in, the exhaust gas temperature will raise because obviously it's burning the fuel, and then the N1 percentage will raise as the turbofan speeds up. So there it goes to 20%, fuel flow kicks in, exhaust gas temperature raises, and N1 speeds up. So let's go and turn some brightnesses up while we're waiting for that. So we're just turning on the brightness of all the display panels so we can see what we're doing in the cockpit. So something else we will need to do is go into even though we're not going to put a flight plan in, we do need to come into the MCDU and do some basic initializations. So where is the... if we clear that. So we're going from EDDF to EDDF. back. So it's just programming it in basically. And now it's saying IRS initialization. So this is important, otherwise we don't get a compass. We can also, we're not actually going to use this, but we can put in a cost index. We can put in 5,000 feet. For our cruise level, we're just going to do a low altitude tour around Frankfurt, but we're not actually going to program a flight plan. The main reason for doing that was to go through IRS initialization, because you have to have a frame of reference on the ground to initialize where the aircraft thinks you are in space, if that makes sense. It's interesting that says we're at 16 degree or 160 degrees. Anyway, so we've got the engines up and running. Now the engines are running, we don't need the APU anymore. We don't need the APU bleed on anymore. And everything looks good. Kind of a point of reference for the Airbus, or the Airbus family of aircraft. Lights on buttons typically mean that they require your attention. If everything's dark, it's usually that, you know, it's in a standard operating situation. So strobe lights on, beacon lights on, turn the logos on, takeoff lights on. We've already got seat belts on. Oh, we haven't armed the emergency lights in the cabin. That's fine, that's done. So if we go and look down now, we can see our laundry list of things to do. So it's saying predictive wind shear is not switched on. That's this little switch here. It just feeds into the autopilot. So TCAS is on standby. That's traffic collision and avoidance system. That's this panel over here. So that knob needs to go to TARA, and then you can switch it on. So this is the radar that looks close to the aircraft and warns you if you're close to any other aircraft. ADIRS SWTG. The ADIRS SWTG alert relates to this switch here, which I don't know if I did this by accident when I did the ECAM brightness, but there you go. If I switch it to norm, the alarm goes away. It basically means that which pilot sees which ADIRS system's data. Anyway, we are almost ready to go. So if I just put the flaps to takeoff position and I remove the parking brake and I arm the speed brakes and I switch the auto brakes to max, and we can press shift and P and we'll start rolling backwards. Now, because there isn't a tug anywhere nearby, it's going to magically push the aircraft backwards for me. So I'm going back towards the taxiway behind me. So we're looking good so far. So we have a look on little nav map, we can see our aircraft moving. Let's just delete trails from the past. So we are pointing 160 degrees and we're going to taxi down to runway 18. So we're just being pushed back far enough to be able to turn around basically. Nearly there. I have to say, this recreation of Frankfurt Airport is stunning. I've been there quite a lot in the real world with work, and it does look very, very good. Okay, so we're just accelerating gently on the engines. I'm just using the spacebar there to sit up and down in the seat. We can press B, which will automatically adjust the QNH, the atmospheric pressure in the airport, so we get an accurate temperature, or accurate pressure reading, I should say. So while we're taxiing down to the runway, we're going to set up the master control panel for the autopilot. So that's this panel here. In the Airbus, the controls for the autopilot, or for most of the dial controls, you can push or pull them. So for the autopilot, you can push, which means clicking on the top half of the control, because obviously it's a two-dimensional display. If you go for the top half, it goes to manage mode. So manage mode means there's a dot and the number is obscured by hyphens. If you click on the bottom half, it means selected. So managed is the autopilot's going to make its own decision about what to do. Typically, to make it work, you need to have a full flight plan filed, which we have not got. So I'm going to use selected mode. So if I click the bottom half, you can see a speed comes up. So this is the speed selector for the auto throttle. So I'm going to choose 200 knots. So I'm just rolling the mouse wheel to choose 200 knots. Getting there slowly. 200 knots. Okay, so same goes for heading. I want to choose 180 degrees to match the runway I'm taking off from. So nearly there, 180 degrees. I also want to go for 5,000 feet in selected mode, not managed mode. I'm not going to worry about vertical speed because I'll do that after takeoff. If I set vertical speed now and then take off, when I engage the autopilot, the vertical speed will change and reflect the actual rate of climb. So it will actually go for like holding the pitch I'm at. So I'm going to wait with the vertical speed until we've left the runway and then set it. So I'll probably set it to about 2,500 feet a minute. So we're just coming down towards runway 18. If we look out sideways, there's the apron just there. So we're going to hold the brakes. You have to be careful with the Airbus. There's a slight positive thrust when the engines are idle. It's not enough to make you pull away from a standstill, but once you're rolling, it is enough to make you slowly accelerate on smooth concrete or tarmac. Okay, so we're just using nose wheel steering to get us onto the runway heading. Okay, so let's bring ourselves to a halt. Just check things over. Everything's looking good. I think we've done everything we needed to. Okay, so we're going to slowly advance the throttles. The runway centre line. You tend to find with the big jets the wind does hit the tailplane and push the aircraft around as you're rolling down the runway, so you sometimes have to counter it by steering into it because they have got whacking great tails. So we're going to rotate at about 140 knots. The reason we're not getting markers on the speed ribbon for rotation is because I've not filed a flight plan. So I've not put in the departure information. So gear up, flaps up. So we can look over here, we can engage the autopilot, and then we can go over here and say we want to climb at, say, 2,000 feet a minute. So we have to engage it, and then it does it. So you see the vertical speed here has dropped to 2,000 feet a minute, so it's just stabilising on it. And we're climbing out towards 5,000 feet. The auto throttle has gone shooting past 200 knots. Did I not engage? Reason for that, I need to pull the engines back to this detent here. So the auto throttle will ignore the speed that you have chosen depending on the setting of the throttle. So you can think of this as an electronic switch. So that's takeoff go around. So it's basically 100%, which I had it at coming off the runway. So it will completely ignore your programmed speed while you're in takeoff go around. So because I've moved the throttle back to this CL detent, it's now taking notice of the speed. So you can see the speed has just dropped back, and the throttles, you can actually see these move. Actually, no, you can't. On the Airbus, you don't see the throttles move. On a Boeing, you would. But you can see it's closing in on 200 knots, coming up to 3,500 feet. If we go and look on this nav map, we can see ourselves climbing away from Frankfurt Airport. So we're going to pull a turn and go around Frankfurt. So we'll go 90 degrees to the left. So if we turn to 90 degrees, let's see what we see from outside. This is going to be a little bit high, isn't it, to see the city nicely, so maybe we'll descend. We'll keep slow, we'll keep at 200 knots. So we're going to go for 4,000 feet. I'm just going to check actually, if we go and look on Little Nav Map, we can go to show information for Frankfurt Airport and it will give us the elevation. Yeah, it's only 300 feet, so we can go to 3,000 feet, no trouble. So I'm going to say selected, I want to go to 3,000 feet. And you could say I want to get there. Oops. One of the penalties of using a mouse is if you miss the control and you're using the mouse wheel, it will zoom in and out. So we want to get down to 3,000 feet at say 1,000 feet a minute. So there you can see the aircraft slowly descending. Throttles will come back. So the aircraft will accelerate to begin with. In fact, it's going to continue to accelerate, but we don't need to worry too much. If you, yeah, look, it's managed to get the throttles back. So throttle response is not immediate in an Airbus, and even so, look, it's still creeping along, going faster and faster. So you can counter that. We've got an air brake down here, so we could put the air brakes out gently, which will help stop our acceleration as we go downhill. There we go. So it's checking it basically. So if we look outside, you can see the air brakes have come out of the wings. So we're coming back down to 3,000 feet. If we look on the map, see where we are. So we're going to do a left turn back to north, and then we get to do some sightseeing. So let's turn our desired heading. .0 degrees. And we can just enjoy looking at Frankfurt. So there's the city over there. It will take a couple of minutes to get there. Shall we accelerate? We're allowed up to 250 knots below 10,000 feet, so let's take it up to 250 knots. Take the air brakes back off so they work. Whoops. There we go. So we're accelerating to 250 knots. We've already got there, look. 3,000 feet is just coming up. And we'll see the city of Frankfurt anytime soon. Let's see where we are on the map. We're just about to fly over Dietzenbach and then Offenbach, Oberthausen. This is Dietzenbach, Offenbach. So let's turn another 20 degrees to the left so we can do a close pass of the city. So 20 degrees to the left, which would be 340 degrees on the heading. I have to say, of all the cities I've seen so far, Frankfurt has to be the most impressive in the simulator for the photogrammetry. It's very, very high quality in Frankfurt. I'm not sure what they've done differently or whether it's just they've improved the algorithms. It's very, very good. Okay, let's do another 20 degrees. So actually, let's go a bit more. Let's go to 300. Fly directly over the city, so we've got enough altitude. So we get to have a really good look. So I've visited Frankfurt quite a lot with work, as I said. So the building I generally work in is over here, West Fulhaven Tower, I think it's called. But yeah, been to lots of these, walked lots of these roads in the evenings. There's a wonderful walk along the river. There's several really nice cafes and restaurants along the river. The museums all tend to be the southern side of the river. There's the big railway station. You can get the railway down to the airport. Okay, so now we've seen Frankfurt. There's the financial district, obviously, with the big banks like Deutsche Bank and people like that. So let's have a look at the map. We're going to come round. I'm just looking at the wind. If we loop back around, we could come in on ILS, couldn't we? On runway 7 right, which would be, interestingly, we can't see the ILS frequency for it. 11135 for 7 right, or 25 right, sorry. 11135. Just check that again. 111.35. So we'll start this doing a turn to 135 degrees.
$2,500.
Yeah, we're going over hills. We're holding the same altitude, but the ground is coming up towards us, so we're getting warnings about getting lower. Okay, so the aircraft is going to do a turn to 135 degrees. We're going to slow down now. Back to 220 knots to begin with. So you will see the speed is bleeding off over here. We're still holding 3,000 feet on the autopilot. There's a little bit of turbulence. So whenever you go over hills, you tend to get a bit of turbulence in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It might not always be accurate, but that's what it does. So again, this is a fully manual flight. So did I say 111.35? Yes, I did, for the ILS for runway 25 right. 111.35. So we come into the MCDU and we can put in 111.35 directly into the frequency, and it's pulled up from its database. It knows exactly what system that is at the airport, which is good. So we don't have to do any more than that. So that basically means when we get back within range of the airport, so we're coming back 135 degrees and then we'll sweep in
2,500
to intercept the ILS. So we can see that happening here, look on the map.
2,500.
You can see various other commercial traffic around that the simulator is putting in the sky for us. Those are not humans, those are real air traffic, aeroplanes. So they're obviously, some of them are low, some of them are not so low. So if we were to look around in the sky carefully, we would see them. I've got labels switched off, which is why we're not obviously seeing them easily. Okay, so let's take our turn to 180. To begin intercepting the ILS. So if we're flying at 3,000 feet, we know the ground is somewhere between 300 and 500 feet above sea level, which will put us at 2,500 feet coming into the ILS feathers. So we need to be kind of at 2,500 feet above the ground at this point. So 3,000 is good enough, probably. So let's take the speed down now to 180. So we're just bleeding the speed off gently, so you can see it coming down. And then we'll be making our final turn for 250 degrees. We can actually find out the accurate runway direction if we zoom in. It's 248 degrees. But we have to account for the wind as well. So if we start turning now for 248, We'll put the flaps down one notch as well. We'll also turn the landing lights on. Also put the gear down. And we'll switch the display. We've overshot the centre line and we're slightly above, so I'm going to come off of autopilot and I'm going to take it in manually from here. So where I'm kind of rushing things, I've come in and I'm above the glide slope, which means I shouldn't be able to attach it. So here we go. I'm just going to recross. You can see the runway over here. I'm just going to go and re-intercept the autopilot. And I'm descending quite quickly. So next level of flaps. So what I'm watching here is the diamond here, which we're coming back towards, and the centre line here. So they tell me if I'm on course for the runway properly. So while I'm busy talking to you and pointing the mouse, I've actually overshot again slightly, but we're getting there. There we go. So the idea is the diamond reflects our vertical position. If you imagine an invisible line away from the runway that you should be flying down, that's our position relative to it. So the diamond is the line, so we're slightly above it. And this line here, it tells us if we are in line with the runway. So at the moment I'm slightly to the right. So if I go left, that line will track more towards the middle. So if you imagine, you can actually follow these instruments without being able to see the runway. So speed is coming down, which is good. Next level of flaps. Overshot to the right. Obviously, when you on a nice clear day like today, you've got the runway as reference in front of you, so you don't have to think too much about it. But usually, if you've got low visibility conditions, you will be thinking in terms of the heading of the runway. And in your position, you kind of form a mental picture of where you are in relation to it in your head. So okay, we're just following the glide slope down. That's a bit of a scenery mistake. Look, they've got a tree
500
on the approach to runway 25. That really shouldn't be there.
400
There's an aeroplane coming in on, I guess that's runway 18.
300 200 100 50 40 30 20 10 5
And we're down. Just try and keep on the centre line. So we have got thrust reversers as well. If I just kick them in, you'll hear them. So we'll just kill the thrust reversers. And raise the flaps and steer off the runway. And jobs are good. So there we go, a quick circuit of Frankfurt in Microsoft Flight Simulator with World Update 6 installed. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to come flying with a few other people running Flight Simulator, I help run a community called Virtual Flight Online. If you go on the internet and head to virtualflight.online, you can see all about it. Now we're actually doing a flight tonight, the day I'm recording this video. We're going to be flying along the Rhine from Dusseldorf down to Mannheim. We're going to be using VFR, so little small aeroplanes will just be flying the river route and having fun. There'll probably be sort of 10, 15, maybe even 20 of us. It varies from day to day how many people come out flying. But yeah, if you want to have a look at that, just head to virtualflight.online and you can see any day of the week what the next flight is going to be. And we typically try and organise at least a couple of flights every week. So go and have a look, virtualflight.online. We have a Discord server as well, which is where we do voice comms. So Discord is great because it allows us to share screens to help each other out. And we can also obviously talk to each other during the flight, so you get quite a lot of laughter and making fun of each other. If if anybody makes a mistake and laughs at their own mistake, it's all good. Anyway, hopefully I'll see you online soon. So I'm just going to taxi back. I'm going to stop the video there.